Hello everyone, I'm Brian. Today I'm reacting to If All That Exists Is Brahman, Where Does Ignorance Come From? Locus of Ignorance. So anyways, what is it? Maya, I don't know if, I have a feeling Maya's going to be involved in this discussion, and I was thinking about this when I selected the video. This is a very interesting question again. I mean, this is something asked in even Western religion, as in, if God is all good, where does evil come from? So, in a sense, ignorance is, a lot of sense, the evil of Advaita Vedanta. All evil comes from ignorance, apparently. And I could be wrong. Definitely could be wrong. But I do believe, as far as I understand, that ignorance is the greatest of all evil. I believe in Advaita Vedanta, even though no one has said that. This is my own conclusion. And now, mind you, I do remember Lakhani saying that people who do cruel things to animals they're not evil, they're just ignorant. And it's very, 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 how can you say such a thing? People who do cruel things to other people, even if you don't say animals, just to people in general. And how can you say they're not evil when they do evil things? And how can you say it's just ignorance? But anyways, that's the reason why as far as I can tell, because there doesn't seem to be this hell or great devil in Advaita Vedanta. It's always been about ignorance. So anyways, let's go get started.
The first question is from Abhilash Srikumar from Lyon in France. Swamiji, my question is on Maya's ontological status. Compared to Atman, mind is only apparently real, a result of superimposition. It is then the product and not the locus of ignorance. Further, ignorance can't exist in the self because they're polar opposites. Mixing them is again due to adhyasa. I feel there is infinite regress or circular reasoning here. Should we view avidya and Maya as a second independent entity coexisting with Brahman?
And I don't know if I said this a little bit earlier. Every time they've talked about Maya, it always seems like a separate entity. It's always like there's Brahman and there's Maya. That's two separate things. But obviously, in terms of Advaita Vedanta, that Brahman only is. So ignorance is Maya. Ignorance is not separate from Brahman, which is pure consciousness, pure knowledge, which is really weird. How could ignorance and pure knowledge exist?
Okay, that's a difficult one. It's one of those subtle philosophical questions, metaphysical questions. What he wants to ask, it's a well-known conundrum in the philosophy of Advaita Vedanta. It's called the locus of ignorance. The locus of ignorance, or the locus of Maya. Maya, Ajnana Adhishthana, Avidya Adhishthana. In Sanskrit it will be called. What it means is simply this. In Advaita Vedanta, we assert that you are Brahman itself, limitless existence, consciousness, bliss. And the reason, and all the problem is because we do not know this. Once we realize this, then from our perspective, from the perspective of Brahman, from existence, consciousness, bliss, there's really no problem at all. But then this all is predicated on, it hinges on one thing, this so-called ignorance of our real self. Now a question is asked, and we also come to this question, if you think about it a little bit, after some time you'll get this question. All right, so ignorance is the problem. Call it Maya, there are other Sanskrit terms, Ajnana, which means ignorance, Avidya, which means the opposite of knowledge, which is ignorance, and so on. A question might come, where or whose is this ignorance? If all that exists really, really is Brahman, and then where is this ignorance? The ignorance can't be in Brahman. If Brahman is, compare it to the sun. There can't be darkness in the sun. The answer would be, no, ignorance is in us sentient beings. We don't know our real nature, so ignorance is in us. Like all ignorance. I don't know maybe German, or I don't know Sanskrit, and my ignorance of Sanskrit, ignorance of German is in me. But then that doesn't make sense either. I, the sentient being, I come after ignorance. You see, it's only because I do not know myself as Brahman, that's why I am as this being, as this limited being. After all, you are asserting that I am Brahman, I don't know myself, that's why I am in this condition as a limited sentient being going through birth and death and suffering and all of that. Therefore, ignorance must have come before me. We catch this, then only the question will make sense. The ignorance, I'm still talking about the question. We're making sense of the question. Ignorance has to come before I become a sentient being. I'm Brahman, everything is fine. And then somehow maybe the ignorance has come, and then I have somehow lost track of my real nature, and I think, just like a dream, for example. So you fall asleep, and then you are a person in the dream, going through nightmare, suffering, and all of that. But for that to happen, there must be a waker who has fallen asleep. So the sleep must come before the person in the dream. The dream arises only after sleep has come. You can't say that the person in the dream is sleeping. I mean, the character in the dream. Character in the dream exists only because the waker has fallen asleep. So ignorance cannot exist in me. I am a product, the individual being, I'm a product of the ignorance. How can ignorance exist in me? It's circular reasoning, as he says. So the question is, where does ignorance exist? Because it can't exist in Brahman. The ultimate reality, it's supposed to be free of all problems. How can it have ignorance? And it cannot exist in this individual being, sentient beings like us. We have ignorance about things in the world. We have lots of ignorance. But this primal ignorance about our real nature as Brahman cannot essentially be in me. It's prior to me. Surely it is in me, but it must be prior to me. Surely I do not know I am Brahman. I am unenlightened. I freely admit it. But this lack of enlightenment, this covering, this veiling, this Maya must be there before I become this miserable creature. So otherwise, it's as he says, it's like circular reasoning. Chicken or egg problem, which came first? Seed or the plant problem, which came first? So what's the answer? The alternative he suggested is, shall we then accept that there is Brahman and there is a power called ignorance separately existing? No, that won't work either. That will lead to dualism, which is anathema to the non-dualist, that are two separate existences, two things. And then the whole of non-duality will fall apart. By knowledge, you get enlightenment. But if there is a separate power which veils Brahman, then knowledge of Brahman won't help you. The veiling will still work. Okay. So what's the answer? Where is ignorance? Two answers here. I'll give you the real answer and then the more commonly accepted answers in Vedanta philosophy, Advaita Vedanta. The real answer, to which we owe to Sureshwara, one of the great disciples of Shankaracharya, he said, it doesn't matter.
So, this answer sounds very familiar to a question I was asked to Neil deGrasse Tyson about what happened before the Big Bang. He gave two answers. He doesn't know, and it doesn't matter. And, well, he also gave a reasoning for it. It's because it's not going to change anything. We just have to acknowledge the fact that it was there. So I have a feeling that's the next thing he's going to say. It's like, it doesn't matter where it came from or how it came to exist. All that matters is that it does exist. I do wonder if that's going to be the answer.
It doesn't matter. Why? Because the question itself is not a correct question.
Oh.
Where is ignorance? The answer is, it isn't. There is no such thing, no such reality called ignorance. But we are in ignorance, we are seeing the effects of it. No. Whatever is dispelled by knowledge never existed in the first place. Whatever you find by knowledge was already there. I have lost some people say, I've lost my glasses, and the glasses are right on the bridge of your nose. I've lost my glasses and looking all over and so what you have lost by ignorance, you don't know it's right there. You really haven't lost it. It's there. And what you find by knowledge, You don't have to do anything. Suddenly I realize it's there. And it's lo and behold, it's there. That was never lost in the first place. So ignorance is, I'm making a philosophical point here. Ignorance is not a reality. It's not what philosophers would call, doesn't have an ultimate ontological status. That's a fancy way of saying it's not ultimately real. You can take it as practically real because that's what we are trying to overcome in this world. But ultimately, when you are enlightened, you will see that there never was something like ignorance. So this is the actual answer.
Okay, so I was completely wrong. I would have figured it would be that, but that's interesting, huh? I had to think about that one. I understand what he's trying to say. Sorry, I did have to pause the video and cough out a lung. So I was a little bit out of breath there. That's it's very interesting to say that something something was never there in the first place. How's there that separation? I'm not gonna pause it for too long because obviously there's two ways of looking at it, and they're saying the practical way, which is the way that we understand it, but that's the only way to understand it. At the same time, the philosophy way, because I can't seem to say the other word, which is the fact that it's something that does not exist. Not that it wasn't there, but it just does not exist. But that's the whole point of it, is it not?
It's not a question that we should be bothered with. Proof of this also is, look at the enlightened ones, whomever you call enlightened in the non-dual tradition, whoever. None of them ever looked back upon their state in ignorance and said, I wonder where that came from. I mean, I am enlightened now. I am Brahman. I'm free. It's all done. It's worked. But that thing which was there, where did that come from? That's one mystery that still remains. I have to give an answer. Where was ignorance? No, it's not a question for them at all. It's not a real question. It comes up because the mind wants to know. Okay. What's the traditional answer which is given, which is accepted if you go to a classical Advaita Vedanta Pandit? He'll give you one of two answers. The two possibilities. Ignorance is in Brahman, and ignorance is in the individual being. First, ignorance is an individual being. Who says this? This is said by one sub-school of Advaita Vedanta called the Bhamati tradition. A great master called Vachaspati Mishra, about 1,000 years ago. He wrote this major commentary on Shankara's commentary on the Brahma Sutras called the Bhamati, and which propounded this theory that ignorance is in us. But doesn't that lead to circular reasoning? He says no. Because the ignorance which is because of which we are here today, it's something that was there in the past life, and that led to this present life and this present ignorant existence. And when you get enlightenment, when you get knowledge, that ignorance is destroyed, it's dispelled, and you realize you are Brahman. Where did that ignorance come from? The past life. It's not circular. But it's not circular like he asks. So it's a very well thought out question. If it's not circular reasoning, it's infinite regress, because the question will be, in the past life, where did that ignorance come from, which was there earlier, because of which we are here now? We didn't know who we were in our past life, and we went on doing stuff and generated karma, and as a result of which we have been born in this life. So that ignorant existence, unenlightened existence in the past life is the cause of this present life. That is very standard karma theory. But then you'll ask the question, where did that ignorance come from? Mm-hmm. And the answer is, came from the life before that. Mm-hmm. But where did the first ignorance come from? Mm-hmm. And the answer there will be, it didn't. There is no beginning. It's called anadi, beginningless. So that's a cop-out. You are avoiding the question. How can it be beginningless? You're just avoiding the charge of infinite regress. In Sanskrit, it is called anavastha dosha, reasoning without foundation. You're trying to find a foundation, a beginning, and you can't find a beginning. You say it's beginningless. How can it be beginningless? But this was explained to us very nicely by a professor of philosophy, J.N. Mahanti, who passed away a couple of years ago. Master of both Eastern and Western thought. He was a master of Nyaya school, of Advaita Vedanta, and in the West, he studied Husserl's phenomenology. Those who have read philosophy, they know. He studied it in Germany, in Göttingen. Um, so he told us that the same thing, ignorance is beginningless. How? He said, actually, every ignorance is beginningless. And I remember he asked us this question. So how many, this was in Calcutta, how many of you know German? None of us, we said, we don't know German. So you don't know German? Said, no,
When
we
did that
don't.
begin?
And since when do you not know German? Oh, from our birth. And he says, oh, so before your birth you knew German. No. It's beginningless, isn't it? The ignorance about anything, about German, about anything is beginningless. And it comes to an end when you pick up your first German book. When you start learning German, starts to dispel the veil of ignorance. So any kind of ignorance actually is beginningless. And it comes to an end when knowledge is generated. So that's the theory of Vachaspati Mishra, traditional theory. It seems to cleverly avoid both infinite regress and circular reasoning. That's one. The other classical theory is
That was very good. I mean, I kind of understood that. I've heard that saying before. It's like, where does your ignorance begin? It's like, well, so before you were born, you had knowledge. Like, no, there's nothing before. I want to try to break that. Like, there's nothing before I was born. Then when I was born, I was ignorant of everything. That's the start of my ignorance, is because before that I had nothing. I don't know if that would break it though. If nothing exists, then I exist, and therefore that's the beginning of the ignorance. Because prior to that I wasn't there, so therefore I had nothing. Before that I wasn't a thing, so therefore you cannot claim I had knowledge of something when I wasn't even there to begin with. I don't know. I mean, these guys are significantly smarter than I am, so I'm sure what I just said was already argued to death about. But it makes sense that you have a start, you have a beginning, and when you begin, that's when everything can happen. Prior to your beginning, there is nothing. So it's not like you had or didn't have knowledge, not at all, because you were nothing. You cannot claim something to have something if it doesn't exist, I guess. But that had to have been argued about.
No. Ignorance, Maya, is in Brahman. Really? How can darkness be in Brahman? How can ignorance is an imperfection? Ignorance is a problem. How can that be in your ultimate perfect reality, non-dual Brahman? Well, for Brahman, it isn't a problem. It's a power. Its effect upon us is veiling of the real nature of Brahman and projecting this entire universe. So for us, it's a problem. For Brahman, it's not a problem. For Brahman, it's a power. It's the power of Brahman by which it manifests this entire universe. So that's against standard Advaita Vedanta. So that's when Brahman becomes the god of religion. Brahman plus this power is the god of religion, which projects this entire universe and all of us and so on and so forth. So these two answers. Where is ignorance? That's the question. The first answer, the real answer is, of course, it doesn't matter because it's not a real question.
I'm sorry, that is hilarious. Just because it is a question, but at the same time, it's not a real question if you look at the philosophical way that he explained it, which is kind of hilarious. It's so funny. Oh my gosh.
From the perspective of the enlightened one. It's a very real question for philosophers.
Yeah.
And again, it's not a real question for the most of us because we are not thinking in that way. It's a question if you think about it. Who thinks about it? The philosopher. Not the man not the common man, not the enlightened man. Not the enlightened person. It's the in-between. The person who's trying to understand the whole thing says we can't understand it. Precisely. One and the two answers from classical Vedanta schools. The answer that it is in the sentient being and it avoids both circular reasoning and infinite regress from Vachaspati Mishra. So this is called the Bhamati school answer. And the other one is, no, it's a power of Brahman. That is what the school is called, Padmapada school. It's called the Vivarana school, just for those who want to know. And its effect on us is ignorance. But the power is Maya. It's the power of Brahman, power of God. The way the monks in the Himalayas have explained it, traditionally if you ask a monk there, a non-dualist monk, what they'll say is, of course it doesn't make sense. When you say that it leads to the problem of infinite regress or circular reasoning, that's a fancy way, a logician's way of saying it doesn't make sense. Of course it doesn't make sense. If it did make sense, then Maya or ignorance would be real. It's a paradox. It has to be paradoxical. If you push hard enough, you'll end up with the paradox. Because ultimately, from an Advaita Vedanta perspective, only Brahman is real. You are Brahman, and that's the reality. If all of this made sense, then it would probably be a real thing. And then Advaita, non-duality, wouldn't be real. Does that strike something? A dream. In a dream, if at any point we come across the illogicality of the dream and we ask somebody in the dream, this doesn't make sense. Is it a dream? Am I dreaming? Could be. And often you tend to wake up from a dream. And the answer would be, yes, it doesn't make sense because it is a dream. It is a dream. That's why it doesn't make sense. I was reading this, and this universe doesn't make sense. Not just to us, but to the deepest investigators of our modern times. I was reading this book by Carlo Rovelli on quantum mechanics. He's an Italian quantum physicist, a cutting-edge physicist, but also a beautiful writer, a very evocative writer. So he describes our theories of the universe in classical mechanics. You know, this whole physics describes universe at its most fundamental level as these vast empty spaces conditioned by general relativity, by gravity, and these tiny, tiny particles pushed around by forces racing through this universe and constituting planets and stars and living beings and so on. And then he says, after a very evocative description, that's the fundamental nature of reality. And then he says, except it's not true. And that's what last 100 years, nearly quantum mechanics is supposed to be showing us. I'm no expert at all on that, not even close. I've just read some popular books. But these are books written by actual practicing scientists and very, very and deep thinkers. And they're saying, none of this is actually true. And that's what he tries to say there is, this is because we are conditioned to think of reality as constituted of things. And that there are cats and dogs and stars and planets and human beings and chairs and tables. He said, except at the quantum level, there are no things. And his understanding of quantum mechanics, there are multiple understandings. But his understanding of quantum mechanics is things are only the way they interact with each other. So something becomes a thing with properties only when it's interacting with another so-called quote-unquote thing. It's only the way reality talks to itself that appears as things and properties. It's very difficult to get your mind around such things. But when I read that, the only thing that jumps out of the pages of the book to me again and again is it screams Maya. That's what the ancients were talking about when they talked about Maya. I mentioned how the Holy Mother, she said, Jamon bhav temni labh, a conversation with one of her monastic disciples, Swami Arupananda. In Bengali, Jamon bhav temni labh, it means as your attitude, the way you practice, that kind of realization you will get. So that means, suppose you worship, so it's Shivaratri is coming, you worship God as Shiva. And you're likely to have an experience of God as Shiva when you get a mystical experience. So the monk whom she was talking to protested. He said, that's just like a dream. I mean, you think about something a lot, it's going to come up in your dreams, likely to. So if you are going to practice this way, meditate and chant and worship Shiva, and then you say, because of that, you get an experience of God as Shiva, that means it's like an hallucination or a dream. You've just stuffed your mind with that thought and that's coming up. It's just a dream. Her answer was very interesting. She didn't try to persuade him otherwise. She said, of course it's a dream. What else is it except not a dream? This is a dream.
Yeah.
This is all a dream. And then she pointed a finger and swept it across what she was seeing. And the Swami writes in his memoirs, within brackets, Jagrat Avastha, our waking world, was what we consider to be real. She is pointing it out. This is a dream. Then he protests. He says, no, but this is not a dream. because this persists. Dreams come and go. There's so many dreams every night. This persists. And he says, maybe it has persisted over many lifetimes. How can this be a dream? And again, she doesn't try to convince him. She says in Bengali, ta holeiba, shapno boito noy. Let that be so. It's nothing more than a dream. It's nothing more than a dream. That's what leads to those paradoxes. I remember...
Real quick, I would have figured she would have said, I mean, again, making an assumption here, goes back to a story about one of the, I believe it's a Hindi story of a person who woke up in the middle of a battle, then all of a sudden woke up in the middle of like a temple or something, then woke up in the middle of a battle again, then woke up in I think it was in a desert actually, and it was running. Essentially, what this is pointing out is the fact that, you know, when we go to sleep, how do we know we're not just waking up in the real world? And the world that we're living in now is not the dream. So essentially, when we're in the waking world, we could be dreaming, and when we're asleep, we're actually awake in the real world. Because you know how we, according to scientists, we have about 1 to 2 dreams every single night. We just don't remember most of it. So I haven't had, let me speak correct English here. I haven't had a dream in a long while. Well, actually, no, I've had some dreams. But there's been a long span of dreamless sleep, but I guess I just forgot all of it. But anyways, this kind of, I thought you would say that. It's like, are you sure you're not dreaming now, and that when you go to bed, you wake up in the real world? I thought she was going to say that.
This book by John Barrows, he's a mathematical philosopher, mathematical physicist. He came here, there's a new school here. I heard him speak on the on unknowability. There. So he has got this book called Impossibility. And he says there that any field, in every field we feel that if you advance far enough, physics, mathematics, biology, whatever, the feeling was you will complete the field. You'll get a full, deep understanding. And yet what we are seeing in just about every fundamental field of study in science is you're ending up with paradoxes, incompletenesses. Whether it's mathematics, Gödel's famous, he was right here in the Institute of Advanced Studies in Princeton, famous incompleteness theorems. Or in physics, you have this, what is that called? So Einstein's relativity, then this uncertainty of the mass and I think position of the particles. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle.
Oh, I thought it's called the slit theory.
So just look at these terms: relativity, uncertainty, incompleteness. Just the terms themselves. I'm not going into the depths because I have no competence there. So every field of study, instead of being completed, as we go deeper and get a better, more sophisticated understanding, it's not solving the mystery. It's not giving completeness as yet, at least. It's just showing, throwing up paradoxes. Okay.
No. I have to go back and watch this video again because my brain went back to the very beginning where it's like, wait a minute, it still doesn't make sense. Whenever he talked about it, it's like, it made sense. So I'm going to pause it real quick. I don't know if I have anything else to say, but I'm going to pause. I'm going to go back real quick. Okay, so here it is. This is the part that I actually wanted to go back to.
No such reality called ignorance. But we are in ignorance. We are seeing the effects of it. No. Whatever is dispelled by knowledge never existed in the first place.
Okay. So I kind of understood this in a couple of different sense. The sheer fact that it makes me think back in the Roman times, I guess, where it says, oh, up on the hill, on Mount Olympus, all the gods live. They climbed the mountain, God that never existed in the first place. Oh, it was in the heavens. We have flying planes, like, oh, it's in space. And these are things that never existed that we thought were real in the first place. man, I was actually ahead. Anyways, so I understood it that way. It's like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Knowledge dispels ignorance, absolutely. But I think the thing here is, let me know if I'm wrong, is that it is not something that we've already had. We just forgot it or something. For example, if I were to, what's behind my hand? You have no knowledge. It's not like you forgot it. It's not like, oh, I know what it is, I just can't think of it. You have zero knowledge of what's behind my hand. You have complete and utter ignorance of what's behind my hand. And only when I remove my hand do you now obtain the knowledge. It's not something that you've had and lost. It's not something that you... Well, that's the best way I could put it, really. It's not that you had and lost. It's something that you never had at all. Nothing. Just my hand. I'm gonna pick up something, but was there nothing to pick up? Maybe this one. Now, what's behind my hand? Do you remember what's behind my hand? It's a pen. But that's the way I look at it. It's like whatever is dispelled by knowledge never existed in the first place. It's, no, the pen does exist. You just didn't know it's there because it was covered by my hand, so you were ignorant of what was behind my hand. It did exist. You just don't know. So maybe, again, he goes to talking about the philosophy and the practical of the two answers here, and that's just something that I need to think about. But let me know if you understood it and explain it the way you understood it. Because, and maybe I'm explaining it in the practical way. I'm going to pause again and go to the practical part. Let me listen to that part. Maybe you guys would be pointing at this particular part. Whatever you find by knowledge was already there. So me hiding the pen behind my hand was already there, yes, but it wasn't already in your mind. In your mind or brain, or mind or brain, or mind, memory was none of it. You had no memory or knowledge of what was behind my hand. Yes, once I revealed it, you now have the knowledge of what was behind my hand. So, can we, again, I'm thinking all this in the moment. I'm not even deep thinking. I'm trying to deep think as we're going along here. So, how long of an ignorance did you have of what's behind my hand? Was it in your prior life? No. This was only created now and here. So there was a beginning to this ignorance. I don't know if this is going to be like a big thing or not. Probably not. But the ignorance is dispelled. So the ignorance is created as soon as you start asking questions, in the sense you start wondering what things are. That's when the ignorance, I believe, starts. Again, I'm sure they've already explained. They probably answer all this stuff, and I'm just being stupid here. Maybe. Very much plausible. But I'm trying to explain my brain or what's going on in my head, and hopefully maybe get you guys thinking, and maybe you know the answer to that, and you can leave it in the comments below. There are probably some people out there who are thinking like me, and like, yes, you know, you make sense. Oh, no, the comment, actually that makes sense more. So you're helping us out by trying to explain how you understand it. I mean, and hopefully it is a way that other people understood it as well, because obviously there's a couple of different ways to explain it, and who knows, maybe I read them like, I still don't get it. So whatever you find by knowledge was already there. Yes, but then there was a beginning to that ignorance. Like me hiding again. What's behind my hand? Nothing. So, anyways, I guess I'll just leave it at that. I probably ran a little bit too long here. So that's my reaction to if all that exists is Brahman, where does ignorance come from? If you like my content, please consider subscribing, thumbs up, stand down below. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next vid.